Hello, and you're all very welcome to this week's Let's Talk Dairy webinar. As always, I'm joined by a Grass10 team member with John Douglas on with us this week, and a little bit later on, we're going to be joined by Donal Ronayne, a dairy farmer from County Mayo, who is in the Aurivo Joint Programme, and we'll get an update from Donal on how the spring has went, and an overview in general of his farming system. So I suppose, John, I think last week everybody thought we were away with it in terms of we had a few very, very warm, sunny days, and all of a sudden we're back to frost this week. What's happening on the ground? Where are we at in terms of the grass situation?
Yeah, look, we thought we had got over the worst of it, but this week was a reminder that we're still not just there yet. And I suppose there's nearly a tale of two halves, James. Like, there's guys who managed even through that rough period, probably drier farms, and guys that are going after grazing more intensely, and they were sort of on target. And then this week has sort of, maybe just upset it a little bit because the growths have dropped, and then maybe need to react by increasing meal or even some silage into the diet to hold farm cover. These are guys that are, the farm cover dropped maybe down into the 500s, and they need to hold it up there. And they know what they have to do that, or else they run the risk of going into too light covers. And then at the other side of things, we have farms, maybe more heavier farms, or farms that just grew well during that good week, and the farm covers. Some two groups of mine that have ran group reports for the last week have farm covers near 1,000 on average. So there's guys up at 11, 12, 1,300 kilos of dry matter per hectare. So you have farms basically with double the amount of grass than other farms. So there's an average there of 788, but some of them are down in the 5 to 600 range, and more of them then are over probably the 11, 1,200 range. And those farms are going to have to manage differently over the next week. But looking at the weather forecast, there is good news. Like if we go down, the predicted rainfall for the next week is maybe around half an inch of rain from most places, maybe a little bit more. Grass growth prediction, we're looking up for the east and the south into the late 50s, early 60s, and maybe towards the west, maybe not getting as much sunshine, and that's probably more down into the early 50s, maybe even late 40s in some cases. So that's where we're at. So most farms should know their demand now. They should know their demand, know their stocking rate, and know what they need to grow. And if in the case where some farms still grew, where their farm cover was good, still grew what they needed to grow this week without having to do anything, well then next week the grass growth is going to jump because of the weather conditions. Soil temperatures are up as well. So what is this? Like, we have to be ready for this. This happens every year. We go from maybe just even feeding some silage this week for some farms, and all of a sudden we have to turn on and we have to get into summer grazing mode. Okay, we got a feel for it there a couple of weeks ago when as you said, with that sunshine, but we have to get ready to go at it again. So how do we do that? Like, there's no better way than just to walk your farm and actually know your own growth rates, know what your own farm cover is, know what your own pre-grazing yield is. That is the best way to do this. Okay, there's no other way around it. And what happens? So if farm covers are getting heavy, so what I mean heavy, I'm sort of saying if it's over 800 kilos of dry matter, you're starting to go into covers of 1,800 coming into May. That will quickly multiply into 2,500 within a week or two if people aren't careful. And what's coming into the sward over the next week or two? There's stem coming into the sward over the next week or two. So I would be advising people to use the projected planner on pasture base to make their grazing decisions. So they can pull out a paddock or two. They could pull out a paddock for reseeding. Maybe the heifers could go back and graze a paddock or two on the block. And they're the sort of the decisions that need to be made to keep grass quality right if there's too much grass on the farm. Likewise, some people might have to put an extra feed this week. They can project ahead based on those predicted growth rates where their farm will be this week. But either way, walking the farm, getting out and seeing what's on the ground and making the decisions is vital over the next week or 10 days as we're coming up into this peak growth. Like we were talking before the call there, like even up the northeast where you are, James, not much growth happens up until this point, and all of a sudden it just skyrockets. And that's what happens. So we're going from like spring, winter sort of mode to summer mode very quickly. And if we're not prepared, if we're not ahead of that, what happens is protein suffer, yields suffer in the next couple of months because of that, because of what's happening over the next week or two. So make sure to be up to date with fertilizer as well and get sulfur out. A lot of people haven't bought sulfur, it seems. So if you have some fertilizer in the yard, maybe it could be saved for the autumn time and try and get something with sulfur in it now to get it out. And look, we're trying to get clover on farm, so reseeding and even oversowing a paddock this week. Dip your toe in the water with oversowing. It's a very simple way of doing it. Requires a little bit of extra management and looking after it, but it's a great way, cheap way to get clover onto the farm and get benefiting from that point of view. And just make sure you're grazing out paddocks well, because stem is going to come in over the next couple of weeks.
Very good, John. Sure, obviously that's it. It's kind of trying to get cows going into 1,400 covers now.
Yeah.
Cows are coming near peak, so when everyone's going to have to manage it a little bit different. I even heard of a few people that maybe had to jump back and graze a little bit of silage ground or whatever it was, just to hold cover wherever it is. Thank you very much. Look, as always, we'll hear from one of the team next week, and hopefully we're talking about taking surplus at that stage. All right, John. Perfect. Thanks a million.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Cheers. So as I said, we've Donal Ronayne, Donal's dairy farming in County Mayo. So Donal is part of the Teagasc Aurivo Joint Programme, based around Claremorris, Donal.
Yeah, based in between Claremorris and Ballindine, South Mayo. Yeah.
Yep, I see you're wearing the club colours there. So you're flying the flag for club football in Mayo, and not only Mayo football. So come here, Donal, a little bit. Maybe give us a wee bit of a background about yourself, your farming system, before we maybe get into some of the cow performance, grass performance data.
So firstly, just thanks for having me on. And I'm actually living just over the border in County Galway. Grew up on a suckler beef and sheep farm. Decided to follow a career in ag, so did ag science in UCD. It was around the same time the abolition of quotas, so I thought dairy was kind of the way to go. So got a kind of a feel for milking from for a neighbour of mine, and kind of got to like it. So I decided to progress and maybe try and follow a career in dairy, and started out in a farm in Roscommon, a new entrant farm, and did the conversion period there. I spent 2 years with a grass-based farmer in Tuam on his second unit, and got a good, very good experience there. Then myself and my uncle, who was a suckler farmer as well, decided to go into a bit of a collaborative arrangement and start milking cows here on his home farm. So basically, we set up a company. We're both shareholders and directors, and I run the day-to-day running of the farm, and he's like a silent partner. He has a beef enterprise separately to the dairy enterprise that he farms on his own, and he also is a contractor. So that's the business side of it. We're milking 194 cows this year. We're in our third year of milk production. We're stocked quite heavily, stocked at 3.7 on the milking platform, 2.7 overall. That's on adjusted hectares. With 53 hectares of a milking block, 24 hectares of silage, and 13 hectares of a heifer rearing block. So overall, we're quite heavily stocked. And spring calving system, crossbred herd. Last year we did over 500 kilos of solids on a ton of meal, and we're aiming for that 530, 540 kilos of solids from a similar, maybe 550 kilo cow, that type of a system.
Just to come back, when did you actually start, Donal? Like, I think last year was only your second year in production.
Yes, 2020 we calved down 205 heifers. We milked 205 heifers in 2020. We milked 200 last year, so that was nearly all second calvers. And this year we're in our third year of production this year. Yeah.
Very good. So you had your third spring of calving cows, I suppose. How did it go before we get on to the difficulties around grazing? Calving go pretty well.
Yeah, it was a tale of two halves, I think, kind of.
Right.
Up until about the 10th of March, everything was too good to be true. Like, the weather was unbelievable. Cows were calving unattended, no assist. Calves were up and healthy, vigorous. We had absolutely no issues. We lost, I don't know, what did we lose? Maybe, I think it was 2 calves the whole spring. Everything was going rosy. But around the 10th of March, obviously the weather turned, grazing got quite messy. Cows were under a bit more pressure, milking out of the sheds. So we had a small bit of mastitis, and cell count slightly crept up, and all the issues that go with it. And we actually lost 3 cows throughout the spring, which was very disappointing. We had a case of tetany a few days ago, which is our first case since we started milking. And we had 2 freak things towards the end of calving, where we had a heifer that bled internally and a cow with a cow calving backways that actually damaged herself in the calving process, and we couldn't cure the infection. So ups and downs, but overall happy enough. The grazing was quite difficult, kind of especially from the 10th of March.
Finished up calving at this stage, Donal, are you, or what way?
Yeah, we calved heavy enough. We got through about 82 or 3% in the first 4 weeks, and we were pretty much finished by the 10th of April. We started around the 11th or 12th of February, and we had all bar 2 cows calved on the 10th of April, and those 2 calved this week, so we're finished.
And come here, did you do anything differently this spring, I suppose? Maybe we'll touch on labour and the labour available on farm in a moment, but was there anything you did differently, I suppose, that listeners could maybe consider for their own farms?
Well, from a calf rearing point of view, we installed an automatic calf feeder. We ended up rearing 180 calves last year, and the labour unit I had lined up for spring actually got hurt the week before he was due to start. So we were a bit stretched for labour. So we ended up having a fairly labour-intensive spring last year rearing calves. So we decided to fit an automatic feeder, and in fairness, very, very happy with it. Found it really streamlined the calf rearing process, and just took the pressure off basically morning and evening around that milking time. Just, you could do your calves during the day at any stage. You weren't exactly tied to doing it at morning and evening. So in fairness, very happy with it so far anyway.
Okay, very good. You mentioned there you reared the vast majority of your calves. Just maybe explain the situation there and what's happening around calf sales.
Yeah. So my uncle, as I mentioned, he's a beef farm, which he farms separately. So he decided to, when he got out of the suckling, to run a calf to beef system. So last year he kept 80 male calves, and this year the same. So I provide 80 calves go to him, be it Frisian bulls or Angus or Hereford males or females. So he has 80 calves for himself, and then we keep 50 heifer calves, and the remainder are sold off farm. So okay, that's the situation there.
Very good. In terms of the grazing, you mentioned it. Happy days until about the 10th of March. How did you get on after that period, or how did you manage it?
So we were going to hit a target by the 10th of March. Obviously, grazing conditions were so good, we were full-time grazing from the get-go. We had nearly 50% grazed by, I think, the 6th or 7th of March. We were going to hit a target, but I kind of knew there was more than likely going to be a spell of weather where we'd struggle to get out. So at that point, the weather did change, and we were kind of forced to stop grazing for periods rather than choosing to stop grazing. So basically, it was on-off grazing, cows in by night for an odd night, out for 3 hours morning and evening. Some days there was a couple of days we didn't get out at all, and basically we just tried our best to get cow grass into them at least once a day if we could. And anytime we saw a break in weather to go at it a bit harder again, we did. And right. We finished up the first round on the 10th of April, and going well since. We're very tight at the minute. I thought last week, growth lifted last week. I thought we were away, but like you were saying, growth rates have dipped again. We're back down to the 40s again, and we're very, very tight. We're really just banking on this bit of heat driving growth on next week.
Oh, where are you at? I'm sure there's lots of listeners in the very same boat at the moment. What are you doing, I suppose? Where's farm cover at? And
yeah, I walked yesterday. Farm cover is 530, which is 140 per cow. We're burnt off paddock at the start of the week for reseeding, so that pushed us up to 3.8. And demand, basically I've gone in with 6 kilos of meal, which is setting our demand at 52. Growth rate was 47, and I'm just hoping that we can hold on to that kind of 500 cover for a few more days, and hopefully with growth rates lift next week, we should be away. We might have to leave in. I know we'll have to feed that couple of extra kilos of meal for an extra few days, but so be it. We'll do everything we can to keep silage out, but we'll walk again on Monday, and if that cover hasn't well, if it has dipped below 500, our growth rate hasn't significantly increased, we probably will have to go in with silage.
Yep. So you're walking nearly more regularly now at the moment in terms of just keeping an eye on that and trying to pre-grazing yields. Are you still all right? Are you still in 1400s? How are they holding?
1400 the last few days, 1400 until Tuesday, and at that point, if there hasn't been a lift in growth, that free grazing will be back to about 1100. So depending now on how the next week goes.
Yep, very good. Come here, I seen you were actually on a webinar recently. You're getting good at these. You want to be careful. You're on a webinar recently about silage quality, and I suppose that's something you're stocked fairly heavily on the platform, obviously. Talk us through a little bit about that and the process around making quality silage.
So 2019 was the conversion year. We reseeded the full milking platform, and when we did so, we did it early, and all the heifers, we had all the bull and heifers on the farm. We decided to bring them all back to the milking platform to graze the milking platform, which meant our dedicated silage ground was freed up. So we decided to reseed that as well. So it's all reseeded in 2019, and basically, yeah, the stocking rate means we're doing a bit of feeding in the shoulders. We're quite a heavy farm here as well, so grazing after the first week of November doesn't really happen. The 1st of November or even the 5th of November is about as far as we get. So there's 6 weeks there where we milk out of the shed. So it's good to have a good bank of high quality silage for that. Again, in spring, we haven't actually fed a crazy amount of silage now any spring, but it's good to have a kind of a bale of cow equivalent, or maybe 2 bales of cow equivalent for the spring. Just like the last month of March there, we did feed quite a bit of silage when ground conditions meant we were in that. So basically 3-cut system. I walked on Monday. I was just walking the headlands for branches and stones, whatever. And there's actually more on it than I was taught. Even though the growth has been poor, it's heading for 3 tons. So I'd expect by the 15th of May we should be cutting. We should be, if weather allows us, we'll cut it around the 15th of May.
Okay. And come here, quality silage, what's that? You're looking at 75 DMD Plus, is it?
Yeah, so the 3 cuts the last 2 years I've tested in around 74 up to 77. The first cut, it doesn't test, it usually tests around 76, 77. Now it feeds out a lot better than the other 2 cuts. So yeah, but generally all 3 cuts are milking quality silage. Like if we get the weather at the cutting time, it'll be milking quality silage, yeah.
As always, folks, jump in, post any questions you might have for Donal. Just on that, in terms of, there's a little bit of commentary around, look at silage stocks are tight, we're going to bulk, we're going to go for a bulkier first cut crop. But, what's your thoughts on that? You're not going to push it out till the end of May and maybe lift a little bit more in terms of tonnage?
No, I think when you do that, like, you're definitely going to lose it at the other end in the 2nd and 3rd cut. Like, our 3rd cut is in by the middle of August, and it's generally you get a spell of good weather at some stage and you get 3 good quality cuts, whereas if you push out the first cut to, say, the end of May, you're probably going into September for the 3rd cut, and often September silage is poor dry cow feed. It's done, like. So look, we've no issue with silage quantity. Like, the stocking rate is very high overall, and we still have surplus silage every year. This year, again, we have enough of silage in reserve, I'd say, for about a 2 months winter as we are left over. So we don't have any issue. We're getting 17, 18 ton of grass, dry matter off the silage ground with 3 cuts. So no, I don't see it as an issue here anyway.
Very good. Come here, you're probably not a million miles of breeding. I think you said you weighed the heifers there recently. Talk us through in terms of what do you go and do, and are you doing anything differently, or what's your process around breeding and genetics?
Small change this year again. We fixed timed the heifers last year and used sex semen. Now, it was our own managerial mistake. I think we had a very poor conception. We had 42% held to first serve. We used 2 sexed bulls across the 40 heifers, and as it happens, both bulls have very poor conceptions to sex semen. So I didn't realise at the time there was some bulls that have higher and lower conception rates with heifers and cows on sex semen. So this year, just to try and increase the conception rate on the heifers, we're going fixed time again, but we're using conventional. We got 80% to first serve the 2 years previous with conventional. So just to try and get more heifers calved down in February, basically, we're going to go with conventional. We have an outlet for the Frisian bull calves off them, as in Liam is very happy with the Frisian bull calves. So we're lucky in that sense. So we got conventional to fixed time on those. The cows, we're using a good bit of sex semen on the cows. Got on well with it last year. 57% held to the sex semen first serve. So we've 60 straws for the cows. I have gone through the milk corn and the EBIs of the cows, so we're going to very selective on what gets dairy and beef. And we have 60 sex semen straws for the cows and 30 conventional Frisian straws for the cows, and the rest are going to beef. So we're starting next Monday. We're doing 7 days of a longer gestation beef bull, starting on the 1st of May. And then on the 8th of May, we're going to start with our dairy semen on the cows. So basically my thinking is we're getting a week of breeding done before our kind of planned start date. Those cows will calf around the same time as the dairy inseminated cows. So we'll still kick off at the same time of calving, but we'll have some higher value calves at the start, beef calves, to sell. And it also means those cows that served next week, the repeats of those will be back in week 2 of the breeding season, and we'll use a shorter gestation beef animal on them at that stage. So we're basically trying to front load the calving as much as possible.
And come here, have you done that in the past, or is that something a little bit new this year?
That's new this year. Last year we did a high weight program, so cows due to be served in week 3 got a shot of estromate on day 10, and they were all served by day 14 or 15. So basically it meant 3 weeks of calving was done in 2 weeks, and the repeats that were due in week 6 repeated in week 5, and we used a shorter gestation Angus bull on those. So basically we got 6 weeks calving done in about 34 days or something like that. So it meant we actually sold quite a bit more milk this year in February and March, and I think a lot of it was to do with front loading that first 4 weeks of calving.
Good few farmers, when you speak to them now, look at they're wanting to improve the quality of their calves, using better beef merit bulls. Seamus Nolan, dairy advisor, was on last week. He said he hadn't heard of any real issues at farm level in terms of calving difficulty. You're probably using decent bulls in terms of beef merit. Your own uncle's taking them and rearing them. Any issues around calving cows?
No. Now the type of cow we have, the bit of Jersey crossing them, like, in fairness, you'd be amazed at how they can put calves out with no issue whatsoever. We're picking them off the DBI, so we look at the DBI value, but we kind of dig into the carcass conformation and carcass weight a bit. John McKay was a big help on that now to us in the Focus Farm group. So I just know this year's group of bulls, like, we're pushing the carcass weight up to maybe 16, 18 kilos of carcass weight.
Yes.
Slightly higher on the conformation and calving difficulty for the cows. Like, I know the hardest calving bull is around 3.7, and we used him last year and we didn't assist any calf at all, so no issue there.
Yeah.
No. And the limousine, we're using a limousine bull next week. He's a calving at 3.6, and just talking to farmers that have used him, no issue calving him, and good strong calves. He's a carcass weight of, I think, 26 or 28 kilos, so there should be good thick calves off him.
Very good. Come here, you mentioned the heifers, weighing them. What weight are they? You're happy?
Yeah, bull and heifers happy. We had a difficult spring with the heifers, got them out in February for 3 or 4 weeks. The weather turned and we didn't, the heifer ground would be very, very mixed ground. A lot of it would be heavy. So we rehoused them the 10th of March, got them back out the last days of March. So they were in for nearly 3 weeks. And I was happy enough. 325 kilos on average on Monday. They're going to be bred on the 9th of May, so they had another 2 weeks set. So the average you'd be happy with. Just individually then it'd be more important. There's 2 heifers, 280 kilos, but they'd be very Jersey, so they'd be actually well on target at that. So in fairness, every heifer is on target in the maiden group heifer, so we don't have to do anything with any of them, so very happy with those. The calves, 77 kilos is the average weight of them, so the average sounds good, but in that there's a couple of outliers. There's a handful of them down around 60 kilos, so we'll give them an extra week on milk before we wean them, and we're starting to wean those next week, and we'll have all those weaned within 3 weeks.
So we bit of preferential treatment for those lighter calves now, just to catch them up as best you can.
Yeah, exactly.
And come here, cow performance, where is it at? 500 odd kilos of solids last year. Majority second lactation animals. That's phenomenal going. Where are we at this year? You're heading into your 3rd season. What are they doing currently?
Cows are milking well now. there's 5 kilos a meal in at the minute, and it'll be 6 over the weekend. But no, they're doing 28 litres at about 370. The last test we got was 370 protein. The fat is 460. Now the fat is fallen the last 2 weeks. It was up around 4.9. So we'd expect to see that creeping back even more probably, and hopefully the protein to keep on creeping up. So they're consistently doing just over 2.3 kilos of solids now since the end of March. So happy enough, yeah. Happy enough of where they're at the minute. Cell count a bit higher than last year, putting it down to kind of that in and out of the shed that was going on there for the month of March, and even the first 2 weeks of April. I think that bit of stress and in and out of cubicles and that wasn't helping them.
We had a wee chat about that yesterday, and you're talking about high cell count being what, 120,000?
120, 130. Yeah, we were down in the 60s and 70s this time last year. So we're back under 100 now. We're down to 91. So hopefully that'll settle down again. Yeah.
You have milk recorded anyway. Have you identified any?
Yeah, we had 3 or 4 high cell count cows. 2 of them actually were clinical mastitis cases that we picked around the same time, and we had another 3 or 4 cases of mastitis since, which will be very high now. We wouldn't have had 5 or 6 cases last year in the whole year, but just putting it down to that kind of period where cows were in and out of the sheds, and they weren't that settled. They weren't in the routine of being out grazing. They were being held in at times on off grazing and that. So we just put it down to that. I think it seems to have settled now, so I'm happy enough. Did
you use Selective last back end, or where are you at with that?
We did, yeah. We used Selective last winter. About 35% of the cows got dry cow tubes, and the rest were sealer only. Very happy, to be honest. No issues. We had no mastitis in the dry cow period, and nothing calf down with mastitis. And the couple of cases of mastitis we've had throughout the spring, majority of them did get dry cow tubes at drying off, got antibiotics so. I think
it's not that it's cows that were picked for Selective that have actually gave the issues this spring. Right.
No, and even the first milk recording, nothing really stood out. There's no you couldn't see a pattern of cows that got sealer only had increased cell counts or anything like that. I didn't see any pattern in it. Yeah.
Very good. Come here, just a comment on. Obviously, you went in and you have a lot of reseeding done in that conversion period. What's your plan? Are you still doing bits of reseeding? Is Clover on your thought process, or where are you at with that?
So we did no reseeding since the initial year, but this year we're starting into a reseeding program. So we burnt paddock off on Monday. As soon as we get a bit of a surplus ahead of us, I have another paddock that I've earmarked for seeding. Yeah, we're going to start incorporating Clover into our reseed. So basically, the plan is maybe 10% reseeding, 10 to 15% per year, and to mind that and try and get Clover established on that and mind it. We're going to oversow one paddock this year as a trial. Was hoping to do it about 2 weeks ago, but I didn't have the Clover seed in time, so we have it now. And the plan is to do one paddock in the next week or 10 days. And we'll see how that goes. If it's a success, we may try a small bit of oversowing on top of the reseeding each year, and we'll be using oversowing as a method of kind of topping up paddocks with Clover content that might just need an extra kick, in spring. So yeah, definitely we're going to chase it and see how we get on with it. Yeah.
Very good. The final point, I said it earlier, touch on it. Labour. You're busy. You've lots going on. You've 180 cows and followers, and you're rearing all you have.
We've good facilities. In fairness, we invested heavily enough in facilities, and that's both in the paddock and the heifer rearing block, the silage ground. Everything is set up to be user friendly as such. So for the most part, it's a one-man operation. In spring, I was lucky enough to get a local lad, Michael, locally came with us for about, I'd say, 6 weeks. He was excellent. He came in Monday to Friday full time, and we had a night calver for the 4 busiest weeks of calving, which meant there was no one here. We weren't working stupid hours or anything like that. He came in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he tipped away then at 5 or 6. If there was nothing happening, he was gone at 4 or 5 o'clock. And it meant when I came in at 6 or half 5 that we were just straight into our routine, and that made the spring very, very straightforward. Michael finished up the end of March, and we have a student here from Pallaskinry, another local lad, and he's with me at the minute, so he's a good help now to us at the minute. He'll be finishing up on the 12th of May, and from then on it'll be one man plus relief at the weekends. So we've a relief milker for Saturdays and Sundays, and that's where we're at.
Sure, if Mayo get a run in the back door high, you'll have to maybe possibly take another few milkings off.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Come here, Donal. I'm not going to hold you any longer. I think it's. I want to thank you for coming on. What you've done, I suppose, you're only into your third year. Over 500 kilos of solids last year. Know from talking to you in terms of your grassland management is exceptional, and the whole system is based very much around grass. I think there's plenty there for viewers in terms of bits and pieces. You're no different than a lot of people, maybe chasing your tail a little bit, looking for grass at the moment. But as you say, it's about monitoring that, and if you need to go in with additional feed, you will. So thanks again. Thanks a million for coming on. And for our viewers, in terms of next week, we have Pat Toohey on. Pat's part of the Heavy Soils Programme team. Pat going to give us an update in terms of, I suppose, grazing success and experiences from the farms on the Heavy Soils Programme. I suppose the do's, the don'ts, what makes it work, how can we make life easier. So thanks again, Donal. Safe farming, folks, and we'll see you next week.